No, I didn't embezzle the company's money, I said, picking up the phone call from my father. The first thing I heard was his booming voice, making my ears ache. How on earth am I supposed to embezzle the company's money when I've retired? You're way off base, I calmly replied to my father, sensing his tone cooling somewhat. But I do know who the embezzler is, he shouted again, his flustered voice audible over the phone. Who is it? Name the criminal, my father demanded, his voice getting louder. The one who's been using the money is... I paused, mentioning the name. My father seemed caught off guard, completely speechless. My name is Henry Hawkins. I have been working in the accounting department of my father's company for 8 years now, I explained. I have a brother, Bob, who's often called Mr. Perfect due to his talent and looks. I've always been compared to Bob and lived in his shadow since childhood, I continued, reflecting on my life. Despite my efforts, my parents always favored Bob for his exceptional talent. Even when I earned achievements, they seemed overshadowed by Bob's presence. Growing up, I yearned for my parents' love, but it always seemed to elude me, I added, recounting the struggles. Eventually, I accepted that I would never match up to Bob's achievements. So, I tried to find solace in living a relatively free life away from their high expectations. However, my path was already decided. I had to join the family business, I sighed, explaining my predicament, not because of my abilities, but simply because I was a family member. Even if I was considered less competent than Bob, supporting the family business was mandatory. Initially, working in the accounting department was peaceful, I recalled, but when Bob took over as president, everything changed. It's a nuisance if you interfere in my management, he would say. I never intended to meddle. I only wanted what was best for the company. As I tried to speak up, I continued, frustration evident. Bob smirked and dismissed me, labeling me as incompetent. Incompetence gets in the way, Henry. So please leave. The phone call with my father left me conflicted. Between family expectations and my own aspirations, the tensions only seemed to grow. I was on the verge of saying a lot of things, but when I heard those words, my will to argue vanished completely. Reluctantly, I agreed to leave the company. Oh, I'm relieved you understand your own incompetence, Henry, Bob taunted as I packed my belongings. Being a CEO seems quite leisurely, doesn't it? You're the one who said I should leave, so once I do, never get involved with me again. Ha, of course I'm the one saying no to you. Don't come crying to me when you're in a financial pinch, Henry, Bob replied with a smirk. Leaving the company felt forced, but I wasn't attached to it. Instead, a strange relief washed over me knowing I could finally move on. Finding a new job took longer than expected. I suspected Bob had been pressuring related companies. Despite the difficulty and time it took, I eventually found a job that brought me satisfaction. It's not a big company, but the people here are warm and kind, I reflected. No one sees me as an inferior elder brother, as they did in my previous job. Have you gotten used to the work? A woman peered into my face as I focused on the computer, showing a kindly smile. She was Sonia Smith, the CEO's daughter of this company. Despite the stereotype of a CEO's daughter being arrogant and pampered, Sonia was nothing like that. Though clearly doted on by her father, she was considerate and caring, even showing concern for me, a newcomer. Yes, thanks to you, I replied with a smile, watching Sonia return to her seat. Thanks to Sonia's care, I began to feel more settled in my new role. I quickly bonded with my new colleagues, and within a few months of switching jobs, my relationship with Sonia had also grown deeper. We often have dinner at a nearby restaurant if we finish work at the same time, I noted, contrasting these interactions with the impersonal atmosphere at my father's company. It was a refreshing change. One day, enjoying my current work-life balance, my smartphone rang unexpectedly. I had finished work early and was thinking of relaxing at home when I saw a familiar name on the display. Bob. I hesitated, tempted not to answer, but knowing he'd persist, I reluctantly picked up. Hello, brother. You're slow to answer, aren't you? Managing well with that new job? Bob's voice was casual, as if lounging around even through the phone. What do you want? I cut to the chase, eager to end the call. Why would I call you someone I've supposedly cut ties with? Bob continued, his tone falsely calm, but I could sense his smugness. There's a woman named Sonia Smith at your company, isn't there? he asked abruptly. I met her at a party recently. She struck me as a good and modest lady. Thought I might get closer to her. I felt momentarily speechless. Bob's intentions were clear, though his voice feigned calmness, masking his underlying smirk disgustingly. I couldn't see his expression over the phone, but I could easily imagine it. Don't tell me you're asking me to mediate between you two, I asked incredulously. You're surprisingly perceptive, brother. That's helpful, Bob replied smoothly. I felt an impulsive urge to hang up right then, but somehow I held back, took a deep breath, and calmly opened my mouth. Didn't you have a girlfriend who was the daughter of another company's president? I probed. I remember when I was working elsewhere, around the time you were becoming president. You were engaged to the daughter of a collaborating company. Though I hadn't spoken to her, I'd heard she suited Bob's personality well. As much as Bob was adored, I couldn't believe his father would approve of him having two girlfriends simultaneously. I continued, raising my concern. Bob's response was weary. Oh, that woman. Her company's in financial trouble. I broke up with her to avoid any trouble for myself. It was a typical story for Bob. Despite being engaged, he cleanly severed ties due to her financial difficulties. Some might see it as a pragmatic approach to a political marriage, but it was something I couldn't support. Even though we're in the same company, she's the president's daughter. She's not just anyone, I emphasized firmly. Casually chatting with Bob was easy, but mediating between him and Sonia was out of the question. Despite seeing each other daily and dining together several times a week, I foresaw trouble if I admitted this to Bob, so I politely declined, making up excuses. Whoa, that makes sense. It's impossible for a regular employee like you, bro. Bob surprisingly accepted my refusal. The call ended somewhat smoothly that day, but soon after, I began receiving frequent calls from him. Each time he called, Bob insisted, you're at the same company. You should find some common ground if you try. Finding it ridiculous, I denied his request and hung up, growing increasingly annoyed with each repetitive call. Then calls from my father started coming, not about work, but about Bob. I thought I wasn't involved anymore. I muttered as my father explained. Bob mentioned you know Miss Smith well. We need your help to deepen her relationship with Bob. As a child, I'd yearned for such validation from my parents, but now it only irked me. I can't do that, I responded tersely, feeling only annoyance listening to my father's reasoning. I ended the call abruptly without saying more. One day, amidst the persistent calls from Bob and my parents, Sonia invited me to dinner after work. To be honest, I was grateful for Sonia's invitation, as it provided a welcome respite from the persistent calls from my parents. We decided to dine at our usual nearby restaurant. Once the food arrived, Sonia looked troubled as she began to speak. Have you been in touch with your brother lately? She asked, her concern evident. I had previously shared with Sonia about my family dynamics and why I had changed jobs. Despite knowing I wasn't on good terms with Bob, her sudden question left me uneasy. Did my brother do something? I inquired cautiously. Well, yeah, Sonia admitted. I guess there was an incident. Bob mentioned they met at a party. I felt a twinge of discomfort hearing this, but the immediate issue was Bob's persistent calls and the possibility he might be disrespecting Sonia. As I voiced my concern, Sonia peered intently at me. Oh, what? I asked, thrown off guard. You don't look much like brothers, do you? Sonia observed, her words stirring childhood memories. The younger one is outstanding, but the older brother is not so much, she continued, reflecting on the differences between us. They don't look like brothers at all. These words echoed sentiments I had heard repeatedly from various people, a reflection of the stark contrast between Bob's success and my more modest achievements. Unpleasant memories flashed through my mind, memories of similar comments from my parents and others. But I brushed them aside, focusing on Sonia's advice. If you're open to advice, she suggested gently, you should consider distancing yourself from Bob. I knew it wasn't my place to interfere, but I felt compelled to speak up. Since changing jobs, Sonia had been kind to me, and I didn't want her to be unhappy. That's why I spoke, but to my surprise, Sonia responded, I feel the same way. She smiled warmly and took a sip of water. I'm not particularly interested in getting close, but my father is concerned. Hey, do you know a secret? She whispered conspiratorially. I was taken aback, but I replied cautiously, is it related to what I know? Who knows? It might be a different story, she replied with a smug smile. Several weeks after our dinner together, my phone rang. It was my father. Our contacts had been sparse lately, so I assumed he was too busy to deal with me. "Hello, Dad. I can't mediate," I started, but before I could continue, he cut in sharply. "That's not why I called today. Have you embezzled money from our company?" His sudden accusation caught me off guard, and his yelling stunned my ears. I briefly considered shouting back, but I understood the gravity of the situation. How could I, having resigned, embezzle company money? "That's a ridiculous accusation," I retorted, trying to keep my composure. "Well, but..." My father's voice faltered, then calmed somewhat. I sighed heavily, steeling myself for what I had to say. "But I know who the embezzler is." "What? Who is it?" My father's voice rose again, demanding the culprit's name. His authoritative tone intensified the ache in my ears, but I knew I couldn't delay any longer. "It's Bob," I stated firmly. "What did you say?" When I uttered Bob's name, my father was completely speechless, caught off guard as if he hadn't anticipated this at all. It's not surprising he chose the younger son, Bob, who is more competent, to be the CEO of the company. I began, reflecting on the situation, but I never expected that Bob would be embezzling company funds. I had become aware of this while still working in the accounting department. Initially, the amounts were small, easily overlooked, but they grew bolder over time. Before I knew it, a substantial sum had been embezzled, and the only person who could have done it was Bob, now CEO. "There's no future for the company at this rate," I thought grimly. "It's on the brink of collapse." Bob must have realized that I knew about his embezzlement, which is why he forced me to quit abruptly. I continued, anticipating my father's disbelief. "If you look at the accounting documents I left, it'll become clear. Do you want to see the evidence I've gathered? I'm prepared to sever ties, but I kept copies of everything for a reason." My father, who moments ago had said he couldn't believe it, fell silent at my words. "But that's not all," I pressed on. "The money he embezzled is being used for an affair with a married woman." "A married woman?" My father's voice shifted from surprise to utter exhaustion. This was news to me as well, I admitted. Sonia told me about it during one of our dinners together. The CEO, who cares deeply for his daughter, found out and is furious with Bob, especially since he's always around Sonia. "At this rate, the company is headed towards bankruptcy," I concluded, knowing this was likely the first time my father was hearing the full extent of the situation. I heard a weak voice from my father, and I listened silently as he spoke. "Can you help me out with some funds? Can you talk to the president of your company for me? If we can form a partnership with the Smith Group, we can turn our company around." He sounded as if he had just come up with a brilliant idea. In reality, I knew that partnering with the Smith Group was likely the only way to save our struggling company. Yet as my father asked for help over the phone for the first time, I felt an overwhelming sense of indifference. "I'm sorry, but I can't," I replied calmly. "I've already severed ties with all of you." "What?" My father's voice rose in disbelief, but I ended the call before he could finish his sentence. After that, my father and Bob called me repeatedly, but I blocked their numbers, finally freeing myself from the constraints of my family. It felt even more liberating than I had imagined. In the end, Bob went bankrupt not long after. He was left with debts, and my parents, who had always treated me as incompetent, were now being pursued for repayment. "Do you ever worry about your family?" Sonia asked curiously as we shared a pasta dinner after work. Since that incident, I felt closer to Sonia than ever. We spent almost every day together now, and I knew I needed to gather courage soon. "No, I'm fine," I replied with relief. "I'm relieved to hear that," Sonia said with a smile. "I'm really glad you're nothing like your brother." "What do you mean by that?" I asked, pausing to drink some water. "It means you're not like him," Sonia replied with a mischievous grin. Realizing that her words no longer hurt me, I was pleasantly surprised. "It's a secret?" She laughed happily. Watching Sonia like that, I felt an even stronger desire to spend more time with her to protect my current company and Sonia. With that thought, I made a firm resolve to continue working hard. I was the man of my dreams, deeply in love, finally becoming the married couple I'd always envisioned. Our wedding ceremony, a culmination of my fondest dreams, was adorned with blessings from many. I imagined my parents in heaven rejoicing, but little did I know, tragedy lurked ahead. Their betrayal shattered everything. I'll never forgive them for what they've done. I'm Mary. Thomas, my boyfriend 2 years my senior, proposed to me, and at 27, we tied the knot. I lost my father in my youth and my mother succumbed to illness 2 years back. Through it all, Thomas has been my unwavering support, lifting me in my darkest hours. Our wedding, on the anniversary of 2.5 years together, marked the start of our joyous journey as newlyweds. With Thomas's demanding job, we postponed the ceremony until his schedule eased. On his days off, we visited the venue, laying the groundwork for our special day. With the date set, it was time to compile our guest list. I was blessed with an aunt and uncle who embraced me as their own daughter. After losing my father, they stepped in, showering me with cooked meals in place of my busy working mother. Their presence filled the void when she was away, ensuring I never felt alone. When illness struck my mother, they shouldered her responsibilities, sparing me the weight of it all. Even in the darkest moments, my aunt's gentle reassurances buoyed my spirits, urging me to hold on to hope for my mother's recovery. With their unwavering support, I found the strength to weather any storm. It's why, when planning my wedding, I insisted they occupy seats reserved for family. Eager to convey my gratitude, I made a long overdue visit to their home. "Mary, congratulations on your marriage," my aunt greeted me, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Auntie. I've been thinking, I want you and Uncle to sit in the seats reserved for family at my wedding. Would that be all right?" "Of course," she replied, her voice filled with warmth as she reached for a large box. "Mary, why don't you open this?" Curious, I obliged, lifting the lid to reveal a stunning white wedding dress nestled inside. Crafted from exquisite silk, it exuded elegance with a touch of charm. Delicate lace adorned the neckline, while intricate flower embroideries danced along the hem, lending it an undeniable allure. Smaller in size, it was evident this dress was tailored just for me. Instantly enamored, I gasped in delight. "Why this dress?" I inquired. "Well, your mother, my sister, she made it," my aunt explained softly. "What? Mom made this?" I exclaimed, disbelief coloring my voice. "Yes. Despite her illness, she poured her heart into every stitch, envisioning this day for you. She asked me to give it to you if ever you married. This dress embodies all the love she held in her final days. Mary, you must wear it at your wedding. It would mean the world to her," my aunt said, her eyes shimmering with tears and affectionate pride. Touched by her gesture, tears welled up in my eyes. "Thank you, Auntie. Holding on to this means everything to me. I'll cherish it, I promise," clutching my mother's handcrafted wedding dress tightly, my heart brimming with happiness. Upon returning home, I reverently hung the dress on my bedroom wall, its presence a comforting reminder of my mother's love. Determined to honor her at my wedding, I envisioned the day with renewed determination. But fate had other plans. Disaster struck one evening when I returned home from work to find the dress missing from its rightful place on my wall. Shocked and bewildered, I frantically searched the room, my heart sinking as reality set in. "How could this happen? It was right here," I whispered, the weight of loss settling heavily upon me. In a panic, I reached for my phone to dial the police. Just then, my husband walked through the door. "Mary, what's wrong?" he asked, concern etched on his face as he hurried to my side. "My dress, it's gone. I had it right here," I sobbed, gesturing to the empty space on the wall. "I think someone took it." My distress seemed to startle my husband, and his response caught me off guard. "Oh, is that all?" he remarked casually, prompting me to question him further. "What do you mean, Thomas? Do you know something?" I asked, my voice trembling with uncertainty. His revelation left me stunned. "Well, yes. My sister mentioned she needed a dress for her upcoming wedding and wanted to borrow yours," he confessed. "What?" I gasped incredulously, realizing he had lent my precious wedding dress without consulting me. It dawned on me then that she had used the spare key from our mailbox to retrieve it. He handed my dress over to his sister without consulting me. I was beyond disbelief, my anger boiling over as I confronted him. "How could you do this?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fury. His nonchalant response only fueled my frustration. "Our wedding is still months away, so what's the harm?" he reasoned, as if it were inconsequential. And my sister was ecstatic. "She's tight on funds and saw it as a saving grace." Saving grace? I never authorized any of this. I shot back, seething at his lack of consideration. That dress was a labor of love from my mother, made specifically for me. Did you forget, Thomas? It's tailored to perfection. How could you lend it out without my consent? His attempt to pacify me only infuriated me further. Relax, it's not like it's a one-time use item. You'll still get to wear it. So what's the problem? he insisted. The problem? It's crystal clear. Why should your sister wear my dress before I do? It's just plain wrong, no matter how you spin it. Despite my efforts to convey my frustration, my husband remained obstinate, refusing to apologize or acknowledge his error. His dismissive attitude only fueled my anger further. Mary, you're overreacting. You need to stop acting like a spoiled child, he retorted, his words a stinging rebuke. Spoiled? How can you say that? This dress holds sentimental value. It was made by my mother for me. It's nonsensical for your sister to wear it before me, I countered, exasperated by his callousness. His indifference pushed me to my breaking point. I'm going to your parents' house tomorrow to retrieve the dress, I declared firmly. Tomorrow? But that's when my sister's fiancé and his parents are visiting, he interjected. Your parents' house, and you think I should just sit back and let them decide? I snapped, incredulous. Let me be clear. Regardless of anyone's opinion, I refuse to allow your sister to wear that dress. The following day, I took a break from work to confront my sister-in-law. Upon reaching my in-laws' home, the lively chatter from within greeted me as I approached the open front door. Stealthily entering, I overheard unfamiliar voices engaged in conversation. You made this dress yourself? That's incredible, Cynthia, a man's voice praised, referring to my sister-in-law. Cynthia, basking in the admiration, modestly deflected the compliment. Oh, it was nothing, she downplayed, proudly showcasing my mother's meticulously crafted wedding dress to her fiancé and his parents. A surge of emotions welled up within me as I listened, my heart heavy with indignation. Claim of creating her dream dress struck a nerve. That dress was a symbol of my mother's love, crafted expressly for me. Without realizing it, I found myself drawn towards them, propelled by a mix of anger and hurt. Storming through the entrance, I snatched the wedding dress from my sister-in-law's grasp and declared, "This belongs to me," in front of the astonished onlookers. All eyes turned towards me, except for my sister-in-law, who paled at my assertiveness. Cynthia, is this true? Her fiancé questioned, prompting her to offer a feeble defense. No, it's not what you think. I really did make it myself. Realizing the futile nature of the conversation, I turned my attention back to Cynthia. Why don't you try it on then? My mother tailored it to fit me perfectly. It won't suit you. It was evident that the dress, designed for my petite stature, wouldn't flatter her taller, more athletic frame. What's going on? My husband's voice cut through the tension, finally making an appearance. My sister must have called him, he fumed, his face flushed with anger. Mary, what on earth are you doing? Are you trying to sabotage my sister's wedding? Sabotage. If anything, it's my wedding that's in jeopardy, I shot back at my husband, bracing myself for another outburst. Just stop. We call off our wedding, so hand over that dress to my sister. What? Called off? I stammered in disbelief. That's correct. We called it off, he asserted firmly. My sister mentioned she's tight on funds, so we decided to gift her the $50,000 we saved for our wedding. And since we're not getting married anymore, we don't need that dress, do we? You lent out my dress without asking, canceled our wedding, and gave away the $50,000 we saved. Have you lost your mind? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Our marriage held little importance to him. With a heavy heart, I fell silent, feeling my love for my husband wane. Canceling the wedding was one thing, but I wanted to cherish this dress forever. And now, because of these thoughtless actions, just then, my sister-in-law's fiancé rose to his feet, his voice heavy with resignation. I guess that settles it. What? Everyone was stunned. Wait, you can't be serious. You're calling off our engagement. Why? In response to my sister-in-law's plea, her fiancé fixed her with a steely glare. Why? It's plain as day. I can't marry someone who's capable of such deceit without a second thought. It's out of the question. Even his parents mirrored his sentiments, their quiet anger evident. Well, that settles that. No more talk of marriage, my fiancé declared, ready to leave with his parents. But just as they were about to depart, my sister-in-law burst in frantic and desperate. Hold on a minute. It's ridiculous to call off the engagement over something like this, isn't it? Mom, Dad, you don't agree, do you? Despite her impassioned pleas to her parents, it was too late. Why are you glaring at me, Mom, Dad? My sister-in-law's plea fell on deaf ears as her father erupted with force. Get out, you disgrace. His words struck like a blow, reducing my typically resilient sister-in-law to tears. How could you be so heartless? This is too much, she sobbed. Stop crying. I don't recognize you anymore. Her father rebuked, his voice filled with disappointment. I can't accept someone who shows such disregard for others' feelings as my daughter, her mother added sternly. Witnessing his sister's distress, my husband stepped forward to intervene. Mom, Dad, please calm down. There's no need to blame Cynthia like this. And you, Thomas, how dare you overlook Mary's feelings? Leave this house with Cynthia, his father added, his tone unwavering. You foolish son, his father's words rang out, stunning my husband into silence, his expression one of disbelief. Then, to my surprise, my mother-in-law approached me, bowing her head in apology. I'm deeply sorry, Mary. We were misled to believe that the dress was handmade by our daughter. No, it's all right, but I can't continue living with Thomas, I responded, my heart heavy with resolve. That's understandable. Our daughter is at fault here. You should move forward with your life without any concerns, she assured me. Her words struck a chord within me. Despite the turmoil, I couldn't shake the guilt of parting ways with my in-laws who had always treated me with kindness. Nonetheless, staying with Thomas was no longer an option. Mary, I'm sorry. Truly, I am. We'll make things right, have a proper wedding. Please don't mention divorce, my husband pleaded, his tone shifting dramatically after his parents disowned him. But I couldn't fathom reconciling with a man devoid of spine. I'm forging my own path now. I can find happiness without you. His plea fell on deaf ears as I stood firm in my decision. Witnessing my resolve, my husband sank to his knees in defeat. After bidding my in-laws a heartfelt farewell, I left their home, packing my belongings and seeking refuge at my aunt's house. Though initially surprised, she respected my decision and welcomed me with open arms. My aunt skillfully repaired the torn dress, restoring its former glory. With my mother's dress refurbished, I sought alimony from my ex-husband, and we finalized our divorce. Unbeknownst to me, he had been diverting our wedding funds to my sister-in-law, which resulted in a slightly higher settlement for me. Both my husband and sister-in-law faced the consequences of their actions and were disowned by their parents, now residing together in our former home. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law, who had planned to be a homemaker, found herself jobless after quitting her job. Now, my ex-husband bore the sole responsibility of supporting them both. Reflecting on my experience, I resolved to be more discerning in choosing a partner if given another chance at marriage, ensuring a beautiful wedding while wearing my mother's cherished handmade dress. 9 people. That's a lot. It feels like a whole baseball team. When I was young, I always dreamed of having a cute house with a white dog, just like in storybooks. But real life isn't always so nice. I finally got my own house, but when I came back from work, it was full of people, like a dormitory. I'm not happy about it. My name's Mary, and I'm 32 years old. I work in an office. I've been really focused on my job, but lately, all my friends have been getting married one after another. Buying wedding gifts has been expensive. I started feeling like I needed to find someone too. So I started going on dates. Mary, when are you going to give me grandkids? Every time I went home, my dad David would ask this, and it made me really uncomfortable. So I started visiting less. My mom died when I was young, so I grew up with my dad, my brother, and my grandparents. My brother got married early and lives near our old home. He has 2 daughters, my cute nieces. I already have nieces at my brother's. Isn't that enough? But we always argued about it. Then my dad got in a car accident. When I reached the hospital, he was in bad shape. He passed away quietly while my brother's family and I were there. Dad, I wanted you to meet someone. I had a boyfriend introduced by a friend. He just proposed and we decided to marry. He liked to show off a bit, but he was kind. His name was Richard. Now that both my parents are gone and my brother has his own family, it does feel lonely, doesn't it? I said softly while petting my cat Lucy, just back from the funeral. Mary, you're not alone. You're part of my family now, Richard said, holding my hand gently. He was worried about me and came to check on how I was doing. Let's make a happy home together, I thought. Maybe I could find simple happiness. Little did I know what was coming. Welcome. It's a bit crowded though. I went to Richard's family home for a meeting. Patricia, his mom, was lively and straightforward. I felt a bit nervous walking in, thinking it would just be his parents, but there were lots of people, in-laws, step-grandparents, Richard's brother Charles, his wife Sarah, and their kids Thomas and John. Nice to meet you. That's a big group. The house, built by Richard's dad James, was a bit old and worn, but the family was so welcoming, it calmed my nerves. On the way home in the car, I mentioned how many people there were. Christmas or Thanksgiving must be quite something, I said to Richard, who chuckled in response. It really is crowded. I can't believe they live like this every day. I was genuinely surprised to hear this. Richard's family home was never big, and I thought it was just for gatherings. 8 people in that house, wow, Richard said. Originally, it was just his in-laws and step-grandparents. But then Charles, who couldn't keep a job, moved in with Sarah and their kids without asking. Charles will probably move out once he finds a job, Richard said, laughing. Back then, I thought Richard's family just had some challenges. After we got married, Richard and I, along with our cat Lucy, lived a peaceful life without kids yet. Richard helped around the house, and Lucy liked us. Charles and his family still lived in that crowded house. The walls were covered in children's drawings, and Patricia laughed, saying she stopped trying to clean them long ago. Sarah, Charles's wife, always looked tired. She was older than Charles and close to my age, so we became friends quickly. Hey Sarah, hurry up. Mary, don't just stand there. We're out of beer. Whenever I visited, it felt like Sarah and I were the only ones not sitting down. We were always busy, and I wondered if this was our fate. But the idea of Sarah doing this every day was scary. Sarah worked full-time to make up for Charles, who didn't work much. I was hesitant, but I finally asked, "Have you thought about leaving him?" "I've thought about it. It's tough. But we have kids, and he used to be kind," Sarah replied. I couldn't see any good in Charles, but I guess they had their reasons. That's what I thought. Around this time, Richard suggested, "How about we build our own house?" I was surprised but happy. I've always dreamed of living in a cute house like in storybooks with a white dog in the yard. I had never told anyone, but when I told Richard, he said, "That sounds great." We spent our free time visiting model homes, choosing a builder, and a year later, our dream home was ready. "We need to keep up with the mortgage," Richard said. "Definitely," I replied with a smile. On the first weekend in our new home, Richard's family came over for a housewarming party. "Here, Joseph, give them the gift. We're coming in." "Oh, what a nice house." Patricia seemed really happy, like it was her own place. I smiled politely. "Look, it's a party." Then Joseph handed me 2 cans of beer like he just bought them. Charles wandered around and found our bedroom, saying, "This bed is so comfy." He jumped on it, and the kids joined in, getting excited. "Look, there's a cat." They ran around chasing our cat Lucy. Lucy is friendly, but she's never met so many people at once, so she got scared and hid in the back of the room. Poor Lucy. I looked at Charles and Richard, who were already busy with the party. "Mary, Patricia wants appetizers soon. Can I use your kitchen?" "And sorry about scaring Lucy," Sarah said, feeling bad. Why is someone as nice as her with a guy like that? I care for Sarah like a sister. "I'll take care of it, Sarah. You relax," I said, but she still helped with cooking while managing the kids. The step-grandparents were quiet, almost like dolls, not saying much. But they said, "Nice home, right, James?" "Yeah, sorry for the noise," James replied, even though the loud ones were the in-laws. The step-grandparents were the sensible ones in that house. So the odd ones were the in-laws, Charles, and probably my husband Richard too. After that, the in-laws and Charles started coming over almost every weekend. They partied loudly till dawn, and we got complaints from neighbors and even the police. Once Sarah, the step-grandparents, and the kids hadn't visited since the housewarming, but the in-laws put me to work without hesitation. I was really stressed out. Richard also started showing his true colors. Once, when I had a cold and asked him to pick up dinner, he came back with hamburgers. "I can't eat this right now," I said, feeling weak. Instead of getting mad, Richard said, "You need to eat to get better, Mary." What if I had the energy to eat that? I wouldn't have asked for help, I thought to myself. Once, when Richard was sick, I sarcastically asked if he wanted a hamburger. He got upset and said, "No, that's ridiculous." In short, this family was selfish and lacked empathy. They were in for a wake-up call. Enjoy your freedom while you can. You'll get what you deserve, I thought with a wicked smirk. A few days later, I had a business trip planned. "I'm off," I said happily to Richard on the morning of my departure. "Is your trip today?" "Sarah's also away on business," Richard said. "Really? I didn't know. What a coincidence," I replied. "Mom said they'd be in trouble without someone to take care of the house." Richard laughed mockingly, making me think he was being mean. I was busy during my trip. Days went by quickly, and before I knew it, a lot of time had passed. A big typhoon hit, and I contacted Richard. "We're okay, but the family home had some serious leaks," he said. I understood, thinking about their old house. The day I came back home arrived. As I walked from the bus stop, I heard loud laughter in the neighborhood. "Is someone having a barbecue? It's so loud. The neighbors will complain." Wait, what? I was shocked. The noise was definitely coming from my house. As I cautiously opened the door, I found bags in the entrance and graffiti on the walls. I was stunned. "Hey, Mary, welcome back," a drunk Richard said. Frustrated, I went to the living room and found drunk in-laws and Charles while Sarah made food in the kitchen. The step-grandparents were quiet, and the kids were drawing on the walls. There was also a woman I didn't know. Overwhelmed, I tried to stay calm. "What's going on?" I asked Richard. "Didn't I tell you? The family home had leaks, so they're staying here for a while," Richard said. "Who was away?" The in-laws, Charles and Richard, decided, "Why don't we live here?" Richard proudly suggested. Even with this explanation, I was stunned into silence. "It's okay. We're family. We have extra rooms." "No problem," the in-laws added, smiling. "Don't worry, Mary. The walls got a bit dirty, but it's just kid stuff," Charles said casually. "And who is that woman?" I asked about the woman on the sofa, playing with her phone. "Oh, that's Karen, a friend of me and Sarah," Richard explained. "Yes, that's right," she said with a smile. "This girl Karen was kicked out by her parents, and Richard said she could stay." "Thanks in advance," Karen replied, leaving me utterly confused. In our not-so-big living room, there were 9 adults and 2 children. The room was messy, with scribbles on the walls far from the new house look. The family was loud like a dormitory. I couldn't help but lose my temper. "Seriously, 9 people is too many. Are you guys planning to start a baseball team or something?" Then I realized something. "Hey, where's Lucy?" I asked, but no one knew where our cat was. Dad opened the window to smoke, and Thomas said Lucy ran away. Charles looked at him angrily. "What were you thinking?" "I told you to be careful with the windows," I said, nearly in tears. Richard, looking annoyed, said, "It's just a cat. We can get another one. If you're unhappy, we can just get divorced," he said with disdain. "You said divorce?" I asked. "Yes, I did. I might not if you apologize," Richard said confidently. "Oh, really? Well, then, here, write this," I said, slamming down the divorce papers I had prepared. My section was already filled out. "I got my bags from my room." "Why haven't you written it yet?" "I'm busy," I said coolly to Richard. They were shocked. Angrily, Patricia said, "Richard, divorce her already. We've built the house, so she's useless now," realizing too late. Richard said, "You'll regret it." But I had no regrets. "You're the one who'll struggle. Just write the papers," I said, taking them and giving some to Charles. He laughed. "When did I marry you?" Looking at the filled wife's section, Charles said, "Hey, Sarah." "This is Sarah," coldly. "I'm divorcing you right now," Sarah said firmly. Charles exclaimed, "Sarah bites the hand that feeds you, huh, Joseph?" He was talking nonsense. From my perspective, Sarah had been treated like a servant in her in-laws' house. Charles took most of her earnings, leaving little for living expenses. This allowed Charles to do whatever he wanted, and the woman in front of me was Charles's mistress. "Mary, I think my husband is cheating," Sarah had confided in me before we planned our divorces. Sarah endured it for her children, but Charles started selling their belongings. She reached her limit. Sarah told me everything. Furious, we started planning our divorces. Sarah gathered evidence of the affair. Her recent business trip was a lie. We looked for a new place to live halfway. Like me, Sarah had no family to turn to, but a friend offered her a job in another state. It was a good opportunity, and our preparations went smoothly. All that was left was presenting the divorce papers. "I want to get out of that hellish house," Sarah said, determined. She had a strong core but had been manipulated by her in-laws. Thinking it would be suspicious to return together, Sarah went back first. She soon contacted me, informing me about the takeover of my house and Charles's mistress moving in. All our actions until then were a performance. Knowing what was happening, I told Sarah, "We're not living there anymore. Let the kids draw on the walls all they want." That's what I told her. Charles, thinking he could openly live with his mistress, happily signed the divorce papers. "Let's go, Sarah. James and everyone, it's time to leave." The step-grandparents stood up and followed Sarah and her children to the door. Living with people like you, I had given up on life. But Sarah opened my eyes, James said, glaring at the family, and left with his great-grandchildren. The in-laws had been taking money from the step-grandparents' pensions. They were truly awful. Well then, take care, we said as we left. You'll regret this, the family laughed, but we ignored them. Months later, Richard contacted me. Oh, I forgot to block him. I could guess the content of the call, so I answered, Mary, come back. Richard sounded desperate. I barely contained my laughter. Come back, we're strangers now, I replied calmly. Let me talk, Mary. What do you mean? Why aren't you paying the mortgage? Patricia's voice came through, probably snatching the phone from Richard. What are you talking about? I have no idea. I played dumb while Patricia sounded frustrated. Apparently, the mortgage for the house had fallen behind last month. When I pressed Richard, he claimed I hadn't been paying it. What an inconvenience. While I remained silent, Patricia kept talking like a machine gun. First of all, this house, you guys had a combined income of $755,000, right? We could have built a better house. We built this as a new home, but it's not what we expected. Originally, they had planned to take over the house. Sarah had informed me of their discussions. Yes, that's true. But with Richard's $30,000 salary, the bank wouldn't lend us more. If we had taken a joint mortgage, maybe we could have gotten a better house. Hearing this, Richard, you lied. I could hear Richard and Patricia arguing on the phone. I ignored them, ended the call, and finally blocked his number. Richard had a pretentious personality. He always wanted to impress others, especially outside his family. When he suggested building the house, I already had divorce in mind. I told him a friend's husband got a mortgage on his own. How cool is that? I heard these stories like a spell. Richard, wanting to show off, opted for a solo mortgage. I had to hold back my laughter. He probably didn't tell his family because he was afraid of them knowing the truth. But I didn't care. The house was built to Richard's taste. I had no attachment to it anymore. Richard hadn't cheated, but there were no alimony penalties in our divorce. So despite him, I left him with the mortgage debt as my revenge. Let him suffer, and I was able to rescue Sarah, whom I cared for like a sister, from that house. That was my main goal. Later, they couldn't pay the mortgage, and the new house was repossessed. But it was a mess inside, with scribbles everywhere and walls yellowed by cigarette smoke from Charles and his mistress. It didn't look like a recently built house. Richard had to rent a cheap apartment, and Joseph and Patricia ended up moving in with him. They'll probably never leave him alone like parasites. I don't care. They're strangers to me now. The only good thing about my former in-laws was that the children weren't affected. Otherwise, they were the worst. Sarah, as Charles' ex-wife, successfully claimed alimony through a lawyer. She had to borrow money but managed to pay it off. I'm glad for her. Charles and his mistress became outcasts in their community and are now missing. They haven't repaid their debts, confirming how awful they are. Sarah is happily working at her friend's place. Her kids are doing well too. I hope they find happiness this time. James and Barbara seem brighter now, like a weight has been lifted. They sold the old family home and are enjoying their retirement in a distant place with their savings. That's great news. As for me, I've requested a transfer to a local office. I was reunited with Lucy, my cat, thanks to social media. Someone in the neighborhood had found and taken care of her. It's good she's friendly now. I live alone in my late father's house with my brother's approval. I'm saving to build my dream house, and someday I hope to introduce someone special at my father's grave. Today, I'm working hard towards that goal. Correct the punctuation of this script, she said. You work here as a janitor. Ha, must be tough being poor. Those condescending words came from Cindy, my brother's wife. Even after not seeing each other for a while, she said this with a snide laugh. For a while now, I've been aware that she doesn't hold me in high regard. I had hoped we drifted apart enough that I'd never have to encounter her again. How mistaken I was. But this time, I refused to yield. The mere fact of her presence here, well, you'll soon understand. Suppressing the chuckle, I maintain my composure and reply. Her expression freezes in an instant as my words sink in. My name's Lita, 30 years old. At home, it's me, my husband Lucas, and our daughter Layla. Lucas and I, we've been an item since college days. Started dating after we both joined the same club. 4 years into dating, we tied the knot when I hit 26. Next thing we knew, we welcomed Layla into our lives, smooth sailing all through the pregnancy. 3 years on, she's thriving, not a single health hiccup in sight. Sadly, Lucas folks aren't around anymore to witness her growth. But my parents? They're pouring all their love onto her, making up for the missing grandparents. Our condo sits just a 10-minute drive away from my childhood abode. Originally, Lucas and I were slated to remain there. My parents had hoped we'd stay under the same roof after tying the knot. Life was serene dwelling with my gentle husband and affectionate parents. However, that tranquility was shattered about 6 months into our union. Enter my brother Cedric, along with his wife. I hadn't laid eyes on him in nearly 5 years. Cedric had severed ties with our parents, dropped out of college, and vanished from home. His whereabouts remained a mystery until he sent a text announcing his marriage. Not a word of congratulations, and he was conspicuously absent from family gatherings, including our wedding. So, you can fathom my astonishment and ire when he suddenly reappeared. Yet I resolved to lend him an ear. What he and his wife divulged, however, far surpassed our expectations. Upon his return home after years, he confronted Dad, saying, "Dad, Cindy and I have made the decision to move in here with you." What in the world? You've been MIA for years, and now you just waltz back in? Listen, I understand it's not ideal, but I'm married now, and living with you seems like the least I can do, doesn't it? Don't be absurd. You didn't even bother showing up to Lita's wedding. Well, I apologize for that, but as your son, it's my obligation to be here. So Lita and her husband will have to find another place. Suddenly, a chill fills the room, leaving even Dad speechless. In the midst of this tense atmosphere, I find my voice. Wait just a minute. You can't simply barge in here and declare that Lucas and I are moving out. And why not? Are you just trying to butter up Dad to snag the house for yourselves? What? That's absurd. I simply want to be close to my parents. You're just a daughter. A son, especially the eldest like me, takes precedence even in matters of living arrangements. Just because you're the son, just because you're the oldest. So what? You dropped out of college by your own choice. You left home by your own choice. I can't tolerate this nonsense any longer. Just leave. I seize my brother by the arm and usher him towards the front door. Our argument persists even as we stand by the threshold, but Cindy interjects. Let's just head home for today. Reluctantly, my brother departs. The ordeal leaves my parents and husband utterly exhausted. We're all anxious about what my brother might do next. A few days later, the doorbell chimes. As I swing open the door, a stranger stands on the threshold, accompanied by a mover's truck parked outside. Perplexed, I inquire, "Are you from the moving company? I believe you may have the wrong address." "Nope, this is the correct address. We're here to handle the move for Cedric." "Cedric? My brother? Ah, I see, your family. My apologies, please come in." "Wait, just a moment." The mover signals his crew, and soon several men begin ferrying boxes into our house. I had no inkling about my brother's move, not a single word. With my parents away, I couldn't verify with them. Fearing I might be the last to know, I hurried upstairs to find my husband. "Lucas, have you heard anything about my brother moving in?" "What? What are you saying? That's impossible." "Then come see for yourself. Movers are bringing in his belongings." "What? This is news to me." "Forget it, just come." I tug my husband downstairs. The hallway is already cluttered with boxes and the movers are swiftly adding more. My husband attempts to intervene, but they counter. "We're simply following instructions. Your family, correct?" We attempt to reach my brother, but there's no response. Our calls to my parents go unanswered as well. Their phones are on silent. Eventually, all the boxes are inside and the movers depart without a further word. Confronted by the stack of boxes, we both grapple to comprehend what's unfolding. What's happening? Why does my brother have all this stuff here? Is he planning to move in without informing Dad or us? We ponder the worst-case scenario, opting to await our parents' return to strategize. However, an hour later, it's my brother and his wife who arrive first. "Hey, Lita, we're moving in. You'd better clear out." "Brother, did you really move your stuff here without informing anyone?" "Why? This was originally my home. What's the issue with bringing my belongings back?" "What?" Amidst our argument, a mocking laugh echoes from behind. I whirl around to find Cindy sporting a smug grin. Catching my stare, she offers a faux apology, devoid of any sincerity. Then, she proceeds to taunt me with a brazen remark. "So, You must be Lita, huh? Can't seem to heed Cedric's wishes or something. How juvenile can you get? Pardon me. What's all this about? Just for the record, my brother made the decision to leave college and move out on his own. Why dredge this up now? Haven't you heard? Cedric's moved back in to reside with your parents. Quite the dutiful son, isn't he? Listen, we never asked for any of this. This is our home, where my husband and I reside, so please kindly leave. Too late. We've already relinquished our condo. What? Regardless, it's you two who need to vacate, not us. Best of luck. With that, Cindy and my brother proceed to unpack. Later, when my parents return home, they confront my brother. Yet he and his wife adamantly refuse to depart. From that moment onward, life takes a turn for the worse. Every day, my husband and I endure insults from my brother and Cindy. They casually use and damage our belongings. When we demand an apology, they brush it off with, "We're family, so what's the big deal?" Even when my pregnancy is confirmed, Cindy remarks, "Lita, you're just a homemaker, aren't you? And Lucas's company is merely average. Your child will be born into poverty. It's quite pitiful. Why are you having a baby before us? Can't you see the situation?" I feel my mental state beginning to deteriorate. Eventually, simply being in their presence brings tears to my eyes, and I find myself retreating to my room, spending entire days locked away. Witnessing this, my parents suggest to my husband that we consider parting ways. If anything were to happen to our unborn child, it would be too late. It seems my parents convinced my husband to swiftly find a new place for us to live away from their home. Without delay, he secures a new residence, and we relocate. Life suddenly becomes serene, as if the past were a distant fabrication. While the initial period post-move feels uncertain, with my husband's unwavering support, I manage to navigate through. I remove my brother's contact from my phone and implore my parents not to disclose our address to him and Cindy. Gradually, my parents begin visiting us frequently, seemingly disregarding my brother and Cindy at the family abode. They inquire about the living expenses and rent they'll be covering for us. When my brother and Cindy refuse to contribute, my parents start discarding their belongings into the yard. Unable to endure such treatment, they eventually relocate. Nearly 3 years have passed, and I haven't laid eyes on them. Though we toyed with the idea of moving back in with my parents, the uncertainty of my brother's return kept us from considering it seriously. Living under the same roof wasn't an option I was willing to entertain. Additionally, our family home was showing signs of age. Lately, the idea of my parents relocating to our condo had been floated. And then, just like any other day, as I stepped out the front door for a bit of shopping, I spotted a familiar face. Instantly, a wave of unpleasant memories washed over me. "Oh my gosh, is that you, Lita?" Oh dear, it was Cindy who greeted me with those words. "Why are you here?" "Why wouldn't I be? I'm just here to explore this fancy apartment building." "Explore? You're not thinking of moving in here with my brother, are you?" "Well, that's a secret, but bumping into you is quite the unexpected twist. Still facing financial struggles?" "Excuse me." Struggling with amusement, Cindy flashed a smug grin. Then she gestured towards my outfit and continued, "That inexpensive sweater and those skinny jeans. Money must be tight for you, huh? Heading out of here looking like that, I see. What are you implying?" "Poor dear, you have a child now, don't you? It's just so unfortunate." "What's unfortunate about it? My husband and I are contentedly raising our child." "Don't get all defensive. Someone like you with no redeeming qualities shouldn't even be having a kid. Talk about delusional." Cindy burst out laughing. That was the final straw. I reached my limit. Nothing had changed since our last encounter. If anything, she seemed even more intent on tearing people down. I couldn't tolerate it any longer. I'd had enough. I steeled myself, preparing to respond. "Look, what's your problem? I understand you don't like me, but can we just avoid getting involved with each other? What's the rush? Worried I caught you at your most pathetic moment." "What are you talking about?" "Don't act clueless. You're a janitor here, right? Must be rough, struggling financially." Laughter. As it turned out, she mistook me for a janitor, not a resident. It was an understandable error. The high-end apartment building I resided in was so luxurious that it seemed improbable we could afford it solely on my husband's income. Cindy, aware of my husband's workplace, presumed our financial constraints. With a contemptuous tone, she pressed on. "It's absurd. You're resorting to working as a janitor just to be near this place. You must be truly desperate." Laughter. "Lita, can you stop jumping to conclusions? I'm not the janitor. Oh, lighten up. How about this? I'll keep quiet about seeing you here to Cedric. But in return, starting today, you'll be my servant. You'll do whatever I say. Got it? She's assuming I'm the janitor in this upscale apartment building and making a childish demand. I've reached my limit. It's time to bring her back to reality. Excuse me, what exactly are you misunderstanding? This is my residence. Cindy, who had been grinning just moments ago, now freezes in disbelief. Ignoring her obvious astonishment, I continue. Allow me to clarify. This is the place where I reside, and it's owned by my husband. Wait, what are you saying? Ignoring her shock, I press on. This luxury apartment was initially among the properties owned by my husband's parents. Now, it's passed on to my husband, who manages it through a real estate agent. The reason my husband swiftly found us a new home is because he owns this place. It was inherited from his parents and was originally designated for renting out. He arranged it to shield me from my brother and his wife. Recently, I've started assisting the real estate agent to ease my husband's workload. Her name should have rung a bell for me from the beginning. My husband and I never spotted my brother's or Cindy's names on the list of potential renters provided by the real estate agent. Cindy, who did you come here with today? What? I came with Cedric, obviously. I didn't hear my brother's name from the real estate agent. So you arrived with someone else? Impossible. I came with Cedric. And at that moment, an unfamiliar man hurries up from behind her and says, "Sorry for the delay." He drapes his arm around Cindy's waist and plants an affectionate kiss on her cheek. In that instant, the pieces fall into place for me. Cindy too senses that I've caught on, hastily distancing herself from the man. I'm sure he can hear me as I speak up. Cindy, are you certain it's appropriate to be in this situation? Engaging in such gallivanting as a housewife. You might exhaust my brother, you know. Hey, what are you implying? Oh, what do we have here? A married woman out on a date with another man? Or is he simply a friend? I need to inform my brother. Please just stop. Her plea is desperate, tears glistening in her eyes. But I can't hold back any longer. Addressing her firmly, I ignore her silent pleas, determined not to let any more unwarranted remarks slip. You've got some nerve, don't you? Bringing misery, pushing people to their breaking point. And you haven't changed at all. And now, you're cheating. You've hit rock bottom. Wait, Lita, please. Enough. Because of you and my brother, I've endured so much. How dare you ridicule others without a hint of remorse? I'll never forgive either of you. You'll feel the agony I've endured, and then some. At my words, she crumples to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. And just like that, Cindy's affair is exposed. Upon my report to my brother, it's revealed she was also concealing her existing marriage, and had been urging her lover to purchase this upscale apartment for her. Caught in the act, Cindy finds herself sued for marriage fraud by her lover. Shockingly, my brother is also discovered to be having an affair with a coworker. His infidelity is unveiled around the same time at his workplace, resulting in his demotion to a provincial office. Cindy purportedly follows him, yet they both continue to blame each other for their misfortunes. Both are slapped with hefty fines, Cindy by her lover and my brother by the lover's spouse. Unable to cover the expenses with Cindy's former housewife status and my brother's reduced salary, they resort to illegal lenders. Recently, it seems they have a long road ahead to straighten out their lives. And no, I won't be lending a hand. As for me, life continues to be blissful with my family of 3. Thanks to my husband's kindness, my parents will also be relocating to the same high-rise apartment building next month. While we won't be sharing a living space, it's another means of staying close to them. I couldn't be more thankful to my husband. I intend to embrace life to the fullest, cherishing those dear to me.